Good evening and welcome to Family and Life's Breaking the Consensus, the interview show that talks to people that the mainstream media would prefer were ignored. Tonight, we have one of the most amazing people we've ever had on the show. Rebecca Kiessling has a story to tell, which, by the way, she was not allowed to tell in Ireland. She was allowed to tell it in Poland after a struggle, but not here. There are going to be things in this show which will shock you. There are going to be things that will probably cause people pain. So just be careful with it. And remember, try and listen to the end because Rebecca's story is amazing. Rebecca Kiessling, good evening. I know it's not evening with you. What time is it there?
It's 3 p.m.
3 p.m.
So good afternoon, good evening, everyone.
Lovely to have you. Rebecca, let's start with right back at the beginning because that matters. You were born under difficult circumstances.
Well, I was conceived under difficult circumstances, and I was born when they landed on the moon. So I was a lunar baby, to give you an idea of how long ago.
A lady never tells her age.
I don't care.
It's a trip to the moon, everybody.
No, my age is relevant because I was protected by law in the United States. I was born exactly 3.5 years prior to Roe versus Wade, which was the landmark United States Supreme Court, which legalized abortion in the US. In Michigan, there was a 1931 law which protected me, a complete abortion ban with no exceptions. And I literally owe my birth to that law, which protected me. You see, my birth mother had been abducted at knife point by a serial rapist. She actually went to 2 illegal abortions, and I was almost killed. She told me absolutely. Even though she was happy to meet me, she told me that if abortion had been legal, she would have aborted me, just like in Ireland. Well, you look at the abortion rate today and you look at what it was under the 8th Amendment, there's a lot of people living in Ireland who owe their birth to the 8th Amendment. And similarly, I owe my birth to the Michigan law, which protected me. She had gone to these illegal abortions exactly 4 years prior to the US Supreme Court decision. So I just barely made it. I imagine there's people, well, children, sweet little children who are alive today who barely made it. And they're going to be the survivors. And hopefully they'll know their stories like I know mine. I'm glad I know the difficult circumstances because it's my testimony and it makes a difference.
It also makes you a victim as well, in a sense, of the rapist. And we don't think of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what a lot of people don't think about is how the baby is oftentimes the hero of the story, where the baby is the one who delivers a mother out of an abusive situation, particularly young girls. We know that rapists, sex traffickers, child molesters love abortion. The abortion clinic is their best friend because it destroys the evidence and protects them and enables them to continue perpetrating. So we know statistically that when a young mother gives birth, not only does the rape end for her, but all the girls in the household who are being raped. And we know that with an abortion, she's likely going to be raped for years.
We saw that in Britain with the abuse cases. There was one particular girl, I think she had 5 abortions in the space of 6 years.
Yeah, and all the abortion clinics did was protect him. They don't care. They don't care about these girls. They care about their agenda. They care about, making money. But they're really not protecting them. It's the baby who protects her. It's the baby who's the proof of what's been happening.
proof is there. You're born. Your mother gives you up for adoption.
Mhm.
So, what was your family like? Your adopted family?
I was raised Jewish by really Jewish atheists, but my atheist Jewish grandmother is the one who taught me her pro-life values. My adoptive father was actually considered himself to be pro-choice until he learned my story when I was 18, and he completely changed his mind instantly when I challenged him on this, because I asked him about abortion. So, but my grandmother, a year after my grandfather died, when I was about 14 years old, started to tell the story that when she was pregnant with my aunt, who was the younger of her two children, my grandfather had told her to go get an abortion. He was trying to bully her into an illegal abortion around 1942. And my grandmother refused.
Great woman.
So I had to face to the issue.
Yes, it was
Like
real.
this, yeah, it wasn't just a concept. I could look at my aunt and think, oh my goodness, how horrible that my grandfather had wanted her killed.
So, your atheist grandmother's pro-life views made absolute sense.
Yeah, and she would cry. She'd say, how could they do that? How could they kill the babies? And she was so upset because that aunt had a daughter. And I remember when I was 12 years old, my 16-year-old cousin had an abortion. And the whole family talked about it, that this was not a good thing. But it wasn't until 2 years later, after my grandfather died, that my grandmother started to tell the story. And I can't help but think, if my grandmother would have told that story while we were all growing up, maybe my cousin would have valued life more.
It's very
And
possible.
instead, for years, she struggled from her abortion, like with bulimia and all kinds of problems, which I'm sure were related to her abortion. It actually made her pretty hardened. But my grandmother was devastated because she had spared the life of my aunt, and in turn, she felt like a betrayal
Only to get
that
her grandchild to do this.
her first great grandchild was aborted.
And that's horrible. And then, of course, there's the fact that the impact it had on your cousin. I
Yeah.
mean, it ruined her life. But we're always told that abortion is a clean solution. You know, get rid of the baby, trouble is gone. Doesn't
Yeah.
work, does it?
Yeah. And my grandmother lost so much of her family through the Holocaust, and so did my grandfather. She was from Austria. My grandfather was from the south of Poland. It was an area called Galicia.
Yes.
And they lost so many family members because of a government which embraced killing innocent people for no offense of theirs.
Yes.
And I grew up knowing this. So I grew up knowing that there's this kind of hatred which exists in the world. And it doesn't matter if the government is supporting it. It doesn't matter how many people support it. If something's wrong, it's wrong.
And there you are, growing up in a post-Holocaust Jewish family with pro-life views informed by the Holocaust. At,
Yeah, yes.
at what point do you find out that you could have been an abortion victim?
So I learned how I was conceived when I was 18.
Okay.
And I met my birth mother when I was 19, learned the horrible details of how I was conceived. And it was brutal. She was, as I said, attacked by a serial rapist. And then she told me that if it had been legal, she would have aborted me. And she said, it should have been my right. You don't know what it was like. And then she ended up telling me about the two illegal abortions that she went to.
Almost.
And she backed out. She didn't go through with the procedure, but she backed out because of the conditions and the fact that it was illegal, as did most women. I'm sure there are women in Ireland who didn't go through with an abortion, and perhaps they could say they would have if it had been legal, but they did not because of the Eighth Amendment.
spoken to several, knocked on the door during the campaign, and a woman told me that had she had the opportunity, had she had, if it had been in Kilkenny, she said I'd have done it. The fact that I had a 3-day wait meant I changed my mind.
And did she look at her child and say, you know, I wish I could have, or does she look at her child and say, oh, thank God the law protected us?
It was the best thing ever happened to her.
Well, my birth mother ended up changing her mind about abortion 6 years after we met. And now, decades later, she is so thankful that the law protected us, didn't just protect me, protected her as well from the horror of abortion.
For you, what was that like? How did it affect you to discover how you'd been conceived?
I instantly felt targeted because I knew what people said about abortion in cases of rape, you know, except in cases of rape or especially in cases of rape. And I felt that I was targeted and devalued. It's extremely demoralizing, dehumanizing for people to call me things like the rapist child. I mean, we always get called the rapist child. You never hear them say, oh, child of a rape victim, because that's what I am. I'm the child of a rape victim. I mean, you know, this horrible man should have no part of me. Yeah. I know who he is, by the way, now because of ancestry DNA. So many from my organization, Save the One, have found their biological father's identities through ancestry DNA. And he never spent a day behind bars. He got to live his life.
He wasn't executed.
No, and I would have been killed for his actions. But he should have no say to me.
I wonder how many of the children he conceived were executed.
Who knows? Who knows? I know, how sad. I could have siblings who had been killed. I found out I have a half brother through him who I adore, who I have a very close relationship with him. And I also had a half sister who died from a car crash about 15 years ago. But, you know, I ask people when they say that they support abortion in cases of rape, I ask them, well, let me ask you, would you support a law which would authorize rape victims to be able to pay someone to kill her alleged rapist? Yeah. Or just her innocent child? Like, are we going to advocate for laws in the Me Too day and age, right? The whole Me Too movement, a woman just says rape and we're just going to believe her, no trial, no nothing. And she's allowed to hire a hitman, hire a paid assassin, and lawfully we're going to advocate for a law that allows her to hire an assassin to go kill her alleged rapist. Like, how many men would be supporting that? Like, oh, sure, yeah, we should do that. You know, let's.
And that was Pope Francis's term, wasn't it? That an abortionist is a paid hitman.
Yes, but the child isn't even the guilty one. The child is completely innocent.
We do have a question from one of our listeners at the moment, one of our people on the thing, to know, was the rapist ever found, and was he punished in any way? But you've answered that. You've told us.
Right. Yeah. I met a cousin of mine who told me all the women in the family know about me now. And my half brother's 2 months older than me. So this guy, the rapist, his wife was 2 months pregnant when he raped my mother. So even if he tried to say, oh, I knew her, it was consensual, I mean, he didn't, he can't identify who my mother is. He doesn't, I mean, it was definitely rape, but he looks like a jerk, right? No matter what. So all of the women in the family were talking about it. And apparently there were a whole bunch of coworkers, because they all worked at the same automotive plant. And a whole bunch of coworkers had accused him of raping them, but he never got prosecuted.
Different age. I think it wasn't, sexual crimes don't seem to have been taken as seriously.
Well, we also didn't have DNA evidence back then. But you know what? He didn't get away with it. in a sense, I've brought justice for my birth mother because everybody in the family knows what he did. And in his old age, he's been shamed. And he had a chance to apologize. He had a chance to come clean, and he didn't repent or anything. So, one day I'll have my peace when I look in his casket. That's it. I have no interest in meeting him before then. And he knows how to find me if he wants to apologize for what he did, to me, but especially to my birth mother. He can come apologize, but I don't think he will. He was a violent man, and he was a womanizer for years, had many, many affairs. And so my brother told me he doesn't recommend me ever meeting him. And if I did, it should be in public and I should bring a man with me. But I'm not going to meet him.
And right now, he's heading to his maker at some stage with all of this on his conscience. So
yeah.
Rather him than me, I think, in that particular case. How did you move from being, as we might say, just pro-life to being a ferocious advocate? Wonderful.
Yeah, there's it's funny. I mean, I have 5 children that I raised, and they would see me on TV or in newspapers, and they'd say, "Oh, Mom, you're famous," But to most people, or a lot of people, they would consider me to be infamous, like I'm notorious, right? Because I have the audacity to value my life, and to do something about it. Like I don't just, lay down and cry. Crawl up into the fetal position and cry. I'm actually a strong woman, and I stand up for myself and for others now. And
tell us that this is what they want. They want strong women until they meet one.
Yeah. Yep. But I feel like my life was saved from a burning building. And I can't look at my life and say, well, I deserved it. Look what I've done. Oh, I'm a lawyer and this, but like, really? No, I don't feel like there's anything extra special about me that makes me more deserving of love and life than anyone else. And, there are people who are every bit as deserving of the chance that I had at life who deserve to be protected. And so as I have the opportunity to go back and save others from the burning building, I'm going to do it. And it's not like my life is at risk, what, a little bit of ridicule, really? That's...
You moved on to advocacy. You say your life wasn't at risk, but when you came to Ireland it was 2018, wasn't it? To speak on behalf of children conceived in rape, and you had a group of women with you, some of whom were rape victims.
Yes.
Three
rape victims.
You were treated appallingly in this country.
Yeah. There was a woman who talked about she'd like to see basically our faces smashed in with steel. And this woman worked at a domestic violence shelter.
She worked at a domestic violence shelter, but
yeah.
She publicly said on social media that she wanted to see rape victims and the children conceived in rape have their faces smashed with steel.
Yeah, but she did get fired from her job.
Well, it's kind of hard that she wouldn't. That's shocking. It's appalling. I mean, I knew some of the details, but obviously not that. You were booked to speak at, I think, the Gibson Hotel. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, we ended up speaking in a courtyard outside, so we did have the opportunity to speak, and there was some media there. But yeah,
you worked at not reporting you, by the way.
There were a little bit of reports about how the hotels were bullied. The workers were bullied. They went to their personal social media pages and were bullying the employees.
These, how can we describe them? People who campaigned for the liberation of women tracked down female employees of hotels where you were due to speak and terrorized them.
Yeah.
hotels. And by the way, to our listeners, no, there was not a Garda investigation of that terror campaign. Just,
well, we went to the police. We went down and we tried to file a police report, and we went face to face, tried to speak to a detective, tried to get action, and they just not interested.
They were not interested.
No.
Eddie, I'm doing this for our listeners because I want them to absolutely be clear on this. The Gardaí were not interested. A terror campaign was being raised by what we can only describe as abortion fascists. The Gardaí were not interested. Now, you did get your...
I mean, we were like, my friend was trembling, crying, like saying she's afraid for her life. This is her first visit to Ireland ever, and this is the way she was treated.
And she's a rape victim.
Yeah.
She's a rape
brutally raped. I mean, it was horrible what happened to her, beaten and raped, and now someone else is threatening to smash her face in.
Because she wanted to tell her story.
And her love for her son.
I can just apologize. That's all I can do. I can say that on behalf of all of the people who've tuned in to this, we are so sorry that you, those ladies, were treated like this.
Yeah. It's hard for women to come and speak up. I mean, in my organization, Save the One, we have a network. I literally have a database of over 1,000 who were conceived in rape and mothers from rape, mostly mothers from rape, post-abortive from rape, where they regret aborting, birth mothers from rape. And we have a few hundred blog articles on our blog. Oftentimes the rape victims use pseudonyms, because it is so difficult to come out with your story. And then to actually be willing to speak is extremely rare, because the way you get treated. When I was in Ireland during that visit, I got to meet with the mother of, was it Baby C? Was that the name of it? Or Case C?
The C case, the lady in the C case. I won't interrupt, but we have from Josh, we have how appalling from the Gardaí, that's the Irish Police Force. Thank you, Josh, and you're right, it was appalling. You met with the lady in the C case. She remains anonymous.
Yes, but I had a wonderful lunch with her, and she just poured her heart out to us and just tried to give words of encouragement, to knowing what was happening during our visit. She knew how we were being terrorized and bullied and threatened, and she just said, you're my voice. This is why it's so difficult to speak up. And she just said how much it means to her that we were there, willing to speak and to be a voice for her.
Just to remind younger listeners, in the C case, that young girl was taken to England on a High Court order and forced through an abortion. She hadn't been informed that the child that she was carrying was about to be aborted. And she woke to discover that an abortion had been done on her without her will, without her consent. She was a traveller. So effectively, a group of racist, radical social workers decided what was best for her.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, her story was being used as justification for legalizing abortion.
They did, because
it was so disturbing to her that the death of her child was being used to glorify abortion.
To this day, I understand she regrets bitterly what was done and what happened to her and her child. But how shocking that they gag her and then use her story in that abusive way.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a better experience in Poland.
Ultimately, yeah. But I was threatened that they would break my legs if I got on the plane. Ended up boycotting. Successfully got 4 public universities to cancel my event.
In some sort of context, here we have a lady conceived in rape, the child of a family, of a post-Holocaust Jewish family, being told if she gets on a plane to come to Poland, they'll break her legs. They're not high on self-awareness, are they?
No, but the people of Poland ultimately ended up being outraged that I was being silenced, that people felt like this was remnants of communism. You know, what an interesting difference in history. I think about like the Irish history and how um, you know, Irish blood was spilled on Irish soil. Okay. Like you have a really tough history in Ireland of outsiders coming in and killing innocent Irish people, right? Having your blood shed all over the country. But it was quite a while ago, you know? And in Poland, like their history was a little bit fresher,
And a little,
having the communists, you know, occupy Poland for a long time. And so they didn't like that these outside values, you know, were being brought to Poland, and that the remnants of communism and not allowing free speech was happening. Uh, and so the vice president of Poland came out in public. The first day I arrived, I spoke in their parliament, and ended up being the #1 news story all week, like what was happening. And so the vice president came out saying that, you know, free speech is important in a democracy and that I should be allowed to speak. And then the university deans said, well, we have the right to do this under our constitution. You know, they don't have the same free speech rights as we enjoy in the United States. So they were allowed to do this.
just that's interesting. You spoke to Parliament in Poland. You got a good reception, I understand. You also spoke here at that sort of quasi made up selected Parliament, the Citizens' Assembly. How did you find
Well,
this?
I also did speak at the Dáil. I also spoke in Stormont when I was up in Northern Ireland within the same year. I had been to Republic of Ireland 3 times within a year. It was my 4th time there speaking.
Wow.
But yeah, so there was a small group of um, politicians that I was able to address in the Dáil. And they were all expressing, you know, sorrow for how we were being treated during our visit.
Nobody did.
Hmm?
Everybody was sorry, but nobody did anything.
I mean, they just talked about how awful the media is. That's what everybody said, just the media is so bad in Ireland.
Pretty dreadful. Pretty dreadful. I want to get back. I mean, obviously, all of the work here was, in a sense, overridden by the dreadful referendum result. But that's. Have you any ideas what we might do now? Because in America, you've pulled things back. I mean, Roe versus Wade was a disaster, but you have been steadily pushing it back. So, have you any ideas how we fight on?
Yeah, you have to never surrender. You know, never surrender, never surrender, never surrender. um, yeah, it's sad, but there's going to be a day of reckoning where you're going to have a lot of wounded women over time who will regret their abortions, and they will be a voice. Your population is going to continue to drastically change. And you know, you'll realize that you're going to be losing a lot of your country's identity. I think a lot of the rich history is going to be lost. So I think people will start to realize culturally what's happening. And you know, there will be voices that will come up. There will be those children who survived like this Holocaust in Ireland, children who were born just before the 8th Amendment, who will learn their stories, who will hear from their moms that they're so glad that the 8th Amendment protected them. And so hopefully there will be, those voices will rise up one day and be able to speak.
Never surrender. Keep fighting.
Yeah.
I want to get back to you and your story because you were reared in an atheist Jewish household, but you didn't stay an atheist.
No.
Well, can you tell our listeners how that came about?
Um, well, somebody inviting me to church, really. First in high school, and that's when I first accepted Christ. Um, Growing up in a Jewish household, like it just wasn't discussed. And my parents actually like freaked out when they found out that I actually believed in Christ. My dad took me to when I was 15, he took me to a rabbi who had dipped me in water when I was 3 years old. It's called a mikvah because my biological family wasn't Jewish. So they explained that's how I was made Jewish. Think in terms, it was sort of like the baptism of John the Baptist, right? What he was doing, how he was baptizing people, because it was sort of a cleansing ceremony. And so I was made Jewish because I was unclean, right? You know? And then they said, you don't have any choice about it. And besides, you are whatever your mother's religion is. And I remember always hearing that. Like, and as I said to my dad, so this has nothing to do with faith. Yeah, but growing up, I knew that you didn't date a goy. That's what they called them. Like it was a Yiddish term for Gentiles. You didn't date a goy. You definitely don't marry one, especially if you're a woman, because you're whatever your mother's religion is, right? So that would be the biggest betrayal for a woman to marry a Gentile. And it would be unfathomable to actually become one. Like the greatest betrayal, like when I told my parents that I believed in Christ, like I might as well have announced that I had joined the Nazi party.
Yeah.
Like that's how serious it was. It was a huge betrayal.
That was really hard for you because I mean you loved your parents and they loved you.
They were they were abusive, actually. I mean, there are things that I can look back in my life, like I'm grateful my parents valued education. They valued health and fitness. Um, but my dad, my mom, I mean, they were very abusive. So, but I still value life. I'm still grateful I had the chance at life.
And to be reared and to get there was pro-life values in that house. So
From my grandmother.
grandmother.
Yeah.
So you accept Christ. What age were you when you because
I
before
was 15 and then I fell away because after about 9 months, I felt betrayed by my church friends. And um, I fell away for a while, and then it was so when I learned how I was conceived, like I believed in God, I believed in Christ, but I was living far from God. I was making horrible choices in my life, and I was really struggling with issues of value, identity, of purpose, like big picture questions: Who am I? Why am I here? You know, what is my value, identity, and purpose? When I learned how I was conceived, you know, it was like
that must have that must tear all of the ground from under you in a sense.
yeah, yeah, it did. And I thought meeting my birth family would help
Yeah.
me figure out where I fit into this world. Like the movie in Forrest Gump, there's this feather where it's kind of like floating around, and that was symbolic of his life, that everything was just happenstance. And that's kind of how I felt. Like I wanted to be grounded. I wanted to have roots. I thought finding my roots, like in Alex Haley's miniseries. I don't know if you ever saw it, Roots, but I saw it when I was young. um, you know, I wanted to find my roots, and I thought that would help me know where I fit into this world, because at Hebrew school, my classmates would remind me that I wasn't really one of them. I was called a bastard, and I wasn't from like the 12 tribes of Israel. Now today, like I know my value identity. Like I know that I'm not a product of rape, but a child of God. I'm a child of a rape victim. But most importantly, I'm a child of God. And I know that God created me. Like the rapist is not my creator.
No.
And God created me. He takes what man meant for evil, he can use for good. It doesn't mean that, God's pro-rape, but I'm like, the child conceived in rape is the rainbow after the storm. Okay, representative of hope and new life and overcoming evil with good.
Turning of evil into good.
Yeah. And so that all really helped me a lot to know who I am, why I'm here. Um, there was a woman in my church parking lot who was really upset that the church was talking about abortion. And she brought up, well, and in cases of rape, and I said to her, I told her how I was conceived, and she was arguing with me, and I asked her, well, did God not create me? Because I'm kind of trying to appeal to her faith. So she stopped to think about it. And I'm like, what are you thinking about? Like, where in the Bible does it suggest that like Satan creates children? And she says, all right, I'll give you that. Like, wow, okay, God and I thank you, give credit where credit's due. Okay, wow. And then I asked her the next question, well, did God not create me for a purpose? And she stopped to think about it again. And she said to me, to my face, well, I just think that God might create some children for the purpose of being aborted.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, this is in church, you know? Um,
Practicing Catholic who goes to church.
yeah, yeah. So, it's out there.
Let me hold back on that. This woman is a human being, and she could say something as foul as that.
To my face. Yeah. So there's people who have these like strange ideologies. So I was created for a purpose. And just to clarify for all of your viewers, it was not to be aborted. It was to go back and save others.
You are listening to every word of this, would never believe that a child is created for abortion.
Yeah. There's people, so I get called things like rapist child, demon seed, evil seed, Satan spawn, horrible reminder, child of the devil, rape trophy. They'll say that I'm a rape apologist, that I'm promoting rape. There's people who have messaged, put on my Facebook page that if you cared at all about your birth mother, you would have killed yourself a long time ago. I mean, and that's out of their care for women that they would say such a thing to a woman like me.
These people don't care about women, we know that. These people are, to be honest, the only thing I can say is these people are evil.
Well, they're certainly choosing that behavior. I mean, I've changed hearts and minds of people who were radical pro-aborts. Like there was this one woman who the last pro-life speaker they had on this university campus was a priest, and she showed up topless on stage when the priest was there. She was completely radical. She came with her friends to hear me speak. And they were mocking me during the speech. And then during Q&A, like they're asking challenging questions. And I had already been warned about her, like to prepare what happened the last time that a pro-life speaker. At the end of it, she came up to me afterwards, wanted to speak privately, and she was crying. And she told me that she was raped when she was a teen. And I just said, oh, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that. You deserve to have been protected. And she's like, please let me finish. And she said, I never thought anyone could ever change my mind about abortion. And she's like, and especially in cases of rape. And then she just starts sobbing. And she says, but you're a really good person. She's like, I can't look at you and say all those horrible things that people have said to you. She's like, you're a good person. And she's like, you've completely changed my mind about abortion. And I'm like, oh my goodness, thank you for sharing this with me. And I'm like hugging her. And she's like, you don't understand. I'm not going to have any friends after this. She's like, all my friends over there are so angry that I'm over here speaking with you. And I look at them and like, they look really ticked off. And she said, and the pro-life people hate me. And I was like, no, they don't hate you. She's like, no, you don't understand what I did. And I'm thinking, no, I already heard the story, And I said, no, it's okay. hey, look, I'll talk to them. Like, please keep in touch with me. Like, and so, look, there's people who
Damn it.
hearts and minds can be changed. It's like the parable of the sower. Like, you never know when it's going to fall on good soil, and God's working on people's hearts.
All the time. All the time. That poor woman had been damaged, hurt, betrayed, and in her anger, she was reacting like that.
Yeah. And what I like to say is, and I've changed hearts of a lot of politicians, like presidential candidates here and around the world, many, many politicians. And what I like to say is that I use honey, not vinegar, right? You want to win people over with love and show them your heart. I mean, present the truth, but do it in a way that's attractive to other people, that's gets them on board, that's loving. I mean, don't be like I know some people who would say, there's no such thing as pro-life with exceptions, only pro-choice with exceptions. Like, so if I would have said to any of these politicians, you're not really pro-life, you're pro-choice with exceptions, like, door would have been slammed shut, conversation over, right? So we have to be savvy in how we present our message. And her heart was changed because she saw me as a good person, because I shared my heart. I shared my hurts. I was authentic.
Hate doesn't convince. It doesn't convince people. It doesn't persuade. And
Yeah.
to people in our anger over what's happening, we display hate. And
Yeah.
terrible mistake. You said you shared your hurts. There's one more terrible hurt I'm going to ask you to share with our listeners, if that's okay. Your two boys.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do this, we won't do it.
Um, my two boys had been to Ireland. I brought all five of my children when they were young, ages 2.5 to 7. We spoke all over Ireland. We were in Dublin and up in Cork and Galway and all over. It was a great adventure. We got to go to 4 castles, which they never forgot. They thought it was pretty cool. But my boys were adopted. They had the same birth mother, and they had difficult stories. Their birth mother was 16 when Caleb was born. She said she was at a rave party. We were told it was the date rape drug. She only knew the guy's first name and never saw him again. And then when she was pregnant with Kyler at 18, she gave birth, and she had been doing heroin. Her mother had been a drug addict, and her father died in his 30s from heart failure, alcohol abuse related. His father died in his 30s, alcohol abuse related, heart attack. And so it was, a tough family history. And our boys knew this growing up. They had, every warning how they should never experiment. And it was actually, we had an open adoption, and they spent time with their biological uncle, who was 3 years older than Caleb, who introduced them to vaping. I don't know if you know what vaping is. It's nicotine, through like an e-cigarette, and they got hooked in middle school. And that, makes them agitated in every respect. It is a gateway drug. They become dependent upon a substance that makes them irritable. They steal to support the habit. They sell to support the habit. When Kyler would go off it, he'd throw up for 3 days. And I mean, they were literally had a dependency on a substance. And then in high school, when Caleb was like 14 or 15, he said that kids were bringing essentially opioids and Xanax, like a benzo, um, to school from their parents' medicine cabinets. Parents who were taking like anxiety medications or had narcotics for after they had surgery and they didn't have it locked up. And they brought it to school, and my sons got addicted. And then when they can no longer get it there, then they go to the streets. And I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but in the United States, it is a major epidemic. For 50 years, the drug overdose rate was a straight line that went up based upon an increase in population. But in 2012, fentanyl was introduced to the United States, and all of a sudden it went straight up. Because they put fentanyl in everything now. They have presses where they can replicate any pill and make it look like the real thing. My boys were off of it for a while and then got back on, struggled, and repented, like wanted to be free from this, told me how much they wanted to be free. And Caleb wrote out a 3-page letter, saying that he wanted to speak in schools and speak to students, wanting not to ever experiment with drugs, really believing that he would be victorious. Kyler wrote like 17-point goals, just didn't want to follow in the steps of their birth mother. He said that like I had a great childhood. He's like, I have so many good memories. We did so many great things, went to all kinds of cool places. And he's like, you raised us right. But last July 29th, they were struggling, and there was a drug dealer with them who apparently got a hold of some fake Percocet, which is Oxycontin, and it was 100% fentanyl.
Just fentanyl is an artificial opioid. It's horrendously strong.
Yeah, it's 1,000 times stronger than morphine. I mean, it only takes a couple extra grains, like grains of salt. That's it, to kill. And there was 4 times the amount that would have been enough to kill them. So the drug dealer was there. He overdosed. Apparently he had overdosed a month before. His girlfriend overdosed a couple months before from drugs he gave her. Like, he didn't care about his own life, but he was revived with Narcan, Noxalone, I forget what it's called, yeah, my 2 sons passed away along with a 17-year-old girl. And, I feel like it's the same spirit of death, that seeks to, it says that in the Bible, it says that the thief came to steal, kill, and destroy. And Jesus said, but I came that you might have life and have it to the full. And I know that these boys like knew Christ. It was like St. Paul talks about, like, the sin that you want to do, you think the sin you don't want to do, you do, and the things you want to do, you don't do. And he talks about this struggle with sin nature, right? And my boys had that going on, and they had an addiction, and they needed help. We can't be pro-choice when it comes to abortion or when it comes to drug addiction, to just say, their body, their choice, let them die. We have to help people who need help. We need to have resources for them. We need to have resources for families. In their school, every time I beg for help with the police liaison officers, there was nothing. There was nothing on the school website for resources for parents. There was nothing on the police website for people, families who are experiencing this kind of thing. There has to be a lot more. And just like we have the need for pregnancy resource centers for women in unplanned pregnancies, we need places where we can help, offer help and hope. So people aren't doing things out of desperation.
Can I ask you this? I can't even conceive of the size of that. What has that now done to your life and to your families? I mean, has it changed what you do in terms of your advocacy? Are you involved in, say, anti?
Um, it's been hard this past year. Uh, I haven't been as active this past year, but also because of COVID. There's like all of that going on. But I was really active on social media, and I had to survive this.
Oh, Rebecca, of course you had.
I have three daughters, Um, my boys, their biological uncle who introduced them to vaping, he died a month later. Same thing, fentanyl overdose. And then their birth mother died in January. It's been a lot. It's been a lot. I had also lost a baby girl 20 years ago, Cassie. She was born with a serious genetic disorder. She was our second adopted child. And I went through a divorce. Um, and it's been difficult.
Through all of this, you've come through it being one of the most amazing people we've ever talked to. I'm sorry for asking you to share stuff that was so hard.
Well, I will tell you though, knowing everything I know now, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. A lot of things I would have done differently, but one thing I would not have done differently was adopting them. I'm so thankful that I got to be their mom. They were thankful that they had me as their mom. That's what Kyler said to me, just before he died. He's like, I'm so glad you adopted me. I lost you. I don't see you there now. But I see it still says recording. But I tell you, my boys, like, I did a couple videos where I shared their pro-life stories and the pro-life observations that they had. I remember when part of the story I shared was when we were on the streets of Ireland at a demonstration in Dublin, and my son saw a huge picture of an aborted baby. And he was 7 years old. Caleb asked, "Mom, is that real?" And I told him, yeah, that's real. And I remember him just saying, "That's murder. That's murder." And then after a while, he said to me, "Mom, I can't look at that photo anymore." He just made him so sad to think that this was allowed, that this kind of thing was legal in different places. And Kyler wrote out his pro-life story. If you look up Kyler Kiessling, Kyler Kiessling, you'll see there's Life News, Life Site News, all published his story, live action. This really powerful testimony, pro-life testimony. And I know he was grateful that he had a chance at life. And I feel like they still have lessons they can teach people. He did a video with his friend when he was 13 years old. His friend was from Mexico, and his friend Eugenio translated his story and here you have two 13-year-old boys sitting there talking about abortion. That video is on YouTube, and it's really cool, and I just feel like people can learn from them still. If you Google Caleb and Kyler Kiessling, you can see like their funeral. There's been over 150,000 views of their funeral, and I hope maybe it can help others, prevent them from getting involved in drugs, or think about how they can get help for their loved ones. So I share their stories.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. We did, and I apologize, we lost Paddy there. There was technical issues from his side, but thank you very much. It was a very, you've had a very tough year. It's been, very moving what you've said, and know that we've all been very encouraged by you and your strength and everything you've done on several planes with your life. But thank you very much for speaking with us tonight and giving us your time. You know, you're a pro-life hero, and you know, we'll post this soon on our pages, and I'll chat to you soon after this meeting. But Rebecca, thank you once again. And
thank you. And I saw the messages at the bottom of the page from your viewers. I really appreciate their kind words.
Yeah. Well, our thoughts and our prayers are with you and all of yours, and know that you know you'll always have that from us. Rebecca, thank you once again, and thank you everybody else who joined in tonight. Take care.
Thank you so much.